Hi, it's TP McAtamney, author of My Waffles Are Cold, The Man's Guide to Abusive. Today's subject, we're going to talk about healing from abusive women in general, whether they're narcissists, whether they're borderline or even psychotic or sociopathic. How do we heal after the relationship is over? And this is an important question because we don't want to spend the rest of our lives ruminating about our experience with the abusive person, because it only stops us from growing and moving on. First, all relationships are hard to move on from sometimes, at least in initial stages. Any relationship is hard to break up and leave from. That's with a good relationship, much less an abusive relationship, where you would think it would be much easier and people would be wiping their brows and saying, thank God this is over. And in some cases that may be true, but from what I read, looking through the internet and different posts that are done by people who have been victims of abuse, that's just not the case. Some of them have great difficulty moving on from an abusive relationship. Some of them to the point where they actually, that's really all they talk about. It's really all they talk about. I know in the initial stages, after my experience with a narcissist, that was true for me. In the first weeks and months afterwards, it seemed like I was talking to everybody. Indeed, just before it ended, I was trying to seek out help and talk to people about it, whether they wanted me to or not in many cases. And the responses I got from people generally were along the lines where, why don't you just move on? Which was a good suggestion, but it was incredibly hard to do so. Part of this is because of the emotional and mental manipulation the person does on you during the abuse. You don't understand it. You're having trouble gaining closure from it. And there's a lot of other psychological and even physical bonds to this person. Again, physical bonds which can occur in any relationship. And you know, as you're looking at all this, generally right after the relationship, you really don't know which way to go. You seem kind of lost in a fog day to day, thinking the would've, should've, could've's, concentrating on them daily, worried about who they're with, visiting their Facebook pages to see what person they're with today by their selfies or whatever. And then, you know, what I call mind screwing yourself over that, particularly if you see them with somebody else, and wondering what was wrong with me, why did they go with this person, what did I do wrong, and on and on. And the first thing you have to do in recovering from an abusive relationship is to come to a point of realization, and that is, it is what it is. It is what it is. All relationships break up either, you know, by a myriad of different reasons, all the way to, in the case where I was married for 30 years, your spouse dies. And, you know, as I said before, just before, I should say, my abusive relationship, I was married for 30 years and lost my wife to cancer. And it wasn't within literally weeks of this that I met the narcissist, who was a former friend, and we just went out on an innocent dinner date. And I had no intention of getting into a relationship, but yet that's what happened. And the reasons that it happened are probably another video, because I had to work through that, the guilt that came from that. It wasn't something, like I said, I planned to do, but it's something I did do. And I always said I'd clean up my side of the street on that, but I do realize I was targeted and then emotionally and mentally manipulated by this person. So you come to the realization that, one, you were abused, and that you're abused by this particular person, and it is what it is. That's what you have to deal with, because what you have to do is separate the fact from the fiction. You have to separate the fact that this is an abusive person versus the fiction, the person that you thought they were and that they presented themselves to be. An abuser tries to get you to believe that it's your fault throughout the entire relationship during what they call the value stage. And this is juxtaposed next to the honeymoon stage, which begins the relationship, where you're treated like you're the best guy or girl they've ever ran into. And that is so strong, that the illusion that they are trying to present to you, that when they go into the value stage, you spend the rest of the relationship trying to figure out what happened. And the one thing you do figure out at that point is, well, it must have been all my fault. I did something wrong, which may or may not be the case at all, right? I mean, you, in a relationship, each person can say, well, I did something wrong. But in an abusive relationship, I would say 99% was not your fault, okay? Like I said, in my particular experience, I did some things. For instance, I went back to drinking, and I drank a little too much and got so crazy I lost my jobs and I couldn't find another job. And for myself, this is not for anybody else included, but it's just looking at myself later on. I said, I worked for 40 years. I've never had trouble holding a job. I always counted myself responsible for providing for myself and those I provided for or helped or whatever, as I did for my wife previously. And so I just took my side of the street. You know, I'm an old Army guy, so I said I should have caught myself up by the bootstraps and went back to work. But like I said, that's another video. But just in short, you know, it's through therapy that I found out that I wasn't really able to do that anyway. I wasn't really able to go back to work, and the problem was why I was losing, because I just wasn't focused. Along with what I said, that, you know, going to work and all you can do is think about this abusive person. You just talk about them all the time, and anybody that stops in the hall or the water cooler, you start bringing it up. It makes people think, rightly so, that you're not concentrated on your job and maybe you should take some time off. So you come to grips with what happened to you. You don't understand it. You don't have to. You were abused. The second step is then to reach out for help. And that's to, in my opinion, to find somebody qualified, such as a mental health professional, that knows how to deal with people that are in trauma. And whether it's you have post-traumatic stress or something else, and that can only be diagnosed by somebody who's a mental health professional, somebody that you can go to talk to on a regular basis to work through a plan to help you overcome the abuse. And they were the ones that will take you through the steps of not only realizing what happened to you, but understanding the reasons why, and helping you. And because they're trained in this, they're the ones that can tell you, you know, what this person was, who this person was, and why they abused you, whether they're a narcissist or a borderline or a psychopath. And then begin to relax you a little bit to the fact that, you know, it's just like being hit by a car. I can sit on the ground and just ruminate how that car hit me, but I don't understand why that car hit me, and then later on find out, well, the guy was drunk, the guy was speeding too fast, he was texting, he was not paying attention, whatever. So this is what they can do to help you realize the why. So first you come to the realization, and now you know the why. And then the third point comes up, and that's, what am I going to do with myself? Because that's where the counseling took me to. What do you want to do with the rest of your life? Do you want to sit on the ground and just basically bemoan your past and what happened to you? Or do you want to just move on with life and not have your day completely focused on this person who in fact abused you? Now, part of the problem is because of the psychological conditioning that was done to you by this abusive person, you may be sitting there wondering back and forth whether or not there's ever kind of any hope to go back to this person. You see, they conditioned you to the point where you love them no matter what. And this is what I said before, if there's some underlying issues that were never addressed in your life, such as codependency. You know, codependents have one thing in common. They all blame themselves for everything. You know, I know myself as a codependent throughout my life. I blame myself for, you know, anything that ever happened in my life that was negative, whether it was my parents drinking, whether it was the schoolyard bully I had in 6th grade, to women I had before my wife. I didn't suffer any kind of abuse with my wife of 30 years. Pretty much a normal relationship. But before her, I had several relationships, which I now can look back and say that lady was a borderline, or that girl was, you know, psychotic or whatever. I just seemed to attract them. And the reason I attract them is because of my codependency issues. And providing you don't have those issues, it's easy to move on, but you first have to deal with those issues. You have to first deal with the underlying issues. This is the part where you take responsibility for yourself. The abuser didn't give you codependency. The abuser took advantage of it. They didn't cause many of the underlying issues. They may have caused some that happened through the abuse, but you may have had issues before getting in there. And it's not to make you defective, but it's known that codependents, by and large, hook up with these types of people because these people look for codependent people. They look for people who are easy prey, and codependents are easy prey. If you think about it, people that don't have any issues, who have a strong self-image, who are their own person, wouldn't stay with these type of people for more than 5 minutes. But if you come out of the relationship and you know for a fact you were abused and you have somebody working you through the whys, and you still have some kind of feeling for them or some kind of love for them, or you're reminiscing about the so-called good old days, then there's something else that needs to be worked out. And again, the therapist can help you with that. First comes an admission in that. You have to admit it and say, okay, or even if you don't want to admit it, say, well, there's a possibility. I do agree there's a possibility. To explore that and give yourself a chance to heal through it. Because once you get that taken care of, all these reminiscence ideas you have about the love in the past, the good times, which there really weren't any good times. Even the best times you can think of, where you were having candlelight dinners, when you realize that the abuser really didn't care for you from the get-go. They were just looking to see what they could get. They may have appeared to be something romantic to you because they understood from the outset that was important to you. And they look for that type of stuff so they can take advantage of it and then get what they want. That's all it is. So the relationship was fake. And through that, like I said, when you take care of the underlying issues in the codependence, you become to realize that the relationship was fake from the get-go. You were lied to. And so there's no sense in even reminiscing about that. Like I like to say to the guys I help, you've been had, okay? You got punked, however you want to put it. Deal with it and move on. So once you get that idea out of your head, what am I going to do for the rest of my life? I suggest after that, as point 4, that you take time for yourself to heal. In other words, don't go looking for another relationship down the line. I waited a full year after my narcissistic relationship, and just by chance ran into another lady, and we started a relationship and we got married. And we've been married for now a year, just celebrating our first anniversary. I was fully intent on spending a lot of time, maybe many years, just finding myself, just dealing with myself instead of worrying about worrying about the abuser and everybody else, which I did most of my life as a codependent. But I'm happy now. I mean, it's good. I'm still working through my issues. I still have some codependent issues. I still have this, but at least now I'm working on that, and I'm still living my life. I don't sit there and think about the narcissist all day. In fact, I don't, and I can honestly say I do not think about that narcissist at all. I don't visit her Facebook page. I don't worry about what she's doing. Don't care. I don't care. My full focus is on my wife right now. She's a beautiful lady. And trust me, we've got enough, when you just get newly married to somebody who's normal, even in the most beautiful relationships like I had with my wife before, you have plenty of issues you can work on. You don't have to, worry about somebody in the past, especially somebody that abused you. So figuring out what you're going to do, it's good to write that stuff down. As you heard me say before, it's good to write down what happened in the abuse, and I suggest you do that in the initial stages as well. The therapist should take you through that, because writing down things helps you put them together. When you come out of a relationship that's abusive, your mind's going to be a jumbled mess. You don't know which way it's up, sideways, downways, whatever. So writing it down, or journaling it, as some people call it, is a good idea. Now journal out your future. Like they say in business interview, what's your 5-year plan? If you can't think that far ahead, make it a 6-month plan, 1-month plan, whatever. What are you going to do? Because in the time between the narcissist and the time to meeting my current wife, I went to the same thing. What do you want to do? Well, I want to go back to college, and I did. I signed up through the Veterans Administration. I'm a veteran, and started going back to college again. Kind of on hold right now because I just got married and I moved to Dubai in the UAE. But I plan to return to that someday, and I have plans to complete my degree in psychology. The thing is that you have a plan, something other than what the abuser, what you had with the abuser. And see, that's part of the problem. Maybe you had plans of a wonderful future with this person from the outset. But think, when you think back to that relationship, how good was it really? That's not what you wanted in life. You didn't want chaos and constant bickering and constant devaluing. You wanted to live your life happily. Everybody has that right. So what do you want to do now? Your shackles have been broken. And as you go on in your healing and in your therapy, or however you do it, you're going to get more free every day. Now, what do you want to do with that freedom? Do you want to keep returning to the jail? It's like a guy coming into a prison, and you've been shackled for sometimes years up in this prison, and they unlock you and they open the door and say, walk free. Now, a lot of people, like I said, it depends on the relationship, the intensity, how long it was. They have prisoners that you hear about all the time that are in prison, and they let them go, and they don't know how to act or feel on the outside because most of their life has been spent in jail. And what you do, again, if that's the case with you, you're going to need more intensive therapy and more intensive work. It's just like the worse the disease, the more intensive the treatment. That's okay. You don't have to just make that your focus at first, but you use that along with whatever plan you may have. Maybe it's just get up tomorrow and not think about the narcissist or the abuser or whatever. If you're practicing no contact, this becomes extremely easy. It's why the hardest thing you can do in the initial stages is practice absolute no contact as much as you can for your situation. Depends on if you're married and have children or whatever. But as limited as possible, and if you're just in a singular relationship, you cut the cord completely. No phone calls, no text, no nothing. Blockity, block, block, block. You have to change numbers, you have to move addresses, whatever you got to do. In recovery programs for addictions, they say, change your friends, change your places, and if you have to, but stay away from the addiction itself. Stay with what you're addicted to. And over that relationship, you became addicted to this person, so you can't keep going back. No more than an alcoholic can get sober while he's going to a bar, or a drug addict while he's going and hanging out with his crack friends down in the hood, so to speak. You just can't do it. You have to separate yourself and get away from that, so it's not in your daily life and therefore not in your daily mind. The therapist will take you through also some therapy sessions, with changing your mind. Because remember what I said in one of the previous videos about the mind and emotion. If you haven't seen that, go ahead and look that up. It's on my channel, TP McAtamney. You can change your thoughts, and that'll change those emotions. So if you're still having trouble with this attachment to the abuser, write it out. Why am I feeling this way? And it's because you're constantly mentally focused on this person. And again, you're not practicing no contact, that makes it much easier, because every time you see a picture of them, every time you see something they're doing on Facebook, or you're still taking their texts and they're messing with you in text, or messing with phone calls, or messing with email, or even worse, showing up at your house, it's going to ruin your day. It's going to put all those thoughts back in your head. You're going to feel like crap. And it's like 2 steps forward and 9 steps back in your recovery. So you have to make the cut. So these are the steps you have to take in order to move forward in recovery. First, you have to basically say to yourself, it is what it is. Just accept the fact you were abused. Then you need to start talking to somebody about it. You need to start getting this out. But not with the guy on the bus, like I used to do, or not with people at work. Find somebody who's qualified to listen to your problems and that understands your problems. It could be an understanding friend, or this is what some of the support groups on Facebook are very good, because they have groups of people who went through what you went through, and they're trying to help each other grow. Now be cautious with this, because there's a lot of groups on Facebook where basically it's just bashing the abusers. Everybody's in there bashing the abuser, and you get posts like, they texted me. My opinion is stay away from those. You want to find out, because it does you no good. Just finding out people are still mad, and being mad is okay. It's okay, but being mad doesn't get you moving forward. You go through the stages of grief at the end of any relationship. In this particular case, if you're mad, you're mad. Okay, get mad, and then get over it, and then move forward. All right, like I said, the more you accept the situation, you say, well, how am I going to accept abuse? You're going to accept it because it happened. You're not accepting because to excuse the abuser or doing anything like. You're accepting because it is what it is. It happened. So get mad, cry, whatever you want to do, But get past that point to where you then start talking to the appropriate people, either an understanding friend, a good support group on Facebook with other men or women who are trying to move forward like you are, with all of the trip falls and things that go with it. And that works, especially with a mental health professional. Big on that. Just be careful who you go to. I mean, don't go to somebody who doesn't know anything about abuse. And there are people out there, but by and large, many of them are trained in this. You don't have money for it. Most communities have a like a mental health center that's funded and paid for and goes on a sliding scale. So if you don't have any money, you'll get it free. Okay. If you do have some money, they'll just go by sliding scale to much you can afford. But you can get help. There's always help out there, and take advantage of it. Maybe you don't want to go. Listen, if you're willing to talk to somebody on the bus about the problem, like I used to do, you're willing to go see a psychiatrist or a mental health professional, because some people are a little skittish about sharing their information to somebody else. Don't be. These people have heard it before, and they're going to treat you individually and treat you with understanding, and then they are trained to show you on how to move forward. And that's the last part, is moving forward from the abuse to the point where you have a new life, to the point where you're not thinking about this person every day. And there's no time limit on any of this, okay? You want to do it as soon as possible for your own mental health, okay? But it may take months, it may take years. In my case, it only took a couple of months because I was so intensively involved in it. For some people, it may take years, depending upon the relationship and other factors such as, you have child custody, divorce issues, where this person has to be in your life at some point, so it can always make you trip back. In which case, you'll share that with your therapist and you modify things a little bit. You change your mind. Once you start seeing the abuser for who they are, and you especially work on the codependency issues, you begin to get your self-image improved and your self-worth improved, that you are better than this, then you just treat them basically like business. So when they're texting you and they're talking crazy talk because they have to because of the kids or the joint custody or whatever, you can know how to ignore those ones and only deal with what's going on, and you can enforce it. Listen, only tell me what's going on. Don't tell me anything else, otherwise I'll block you. It's as simple as that, and not have any qualms about it at all. So this is T.P. McIntamney. I hope that, author of My Waffles Are Cold, A Man's Guide to Abusive Women. I hope this was helpful. And if you get any questions or comments or anything, just post them on the video, and I'll see you again soon with a new video.